Good afternoon. My name is Anwar Versi. I'm going to be your moderator for this session, which I think is going to be one of the most interesting ones and most exciting ones we'll have in this forum. It's on education and sport, and I am the editor of African Business Magazine, which is based in London. And many moons ago, I wrote a book on football in Africa, and perhaps this is why I'm here today. We have very, very fortunate today in our panel. We have one man who ran the biggest sport in the world. We have one man who organized perhaps one of the biggest events in recent history. And we have one man who's going to put together an historic event in the very near future in this very city. So we have got an absolutely excellent panel. So having said that, it is now my great pleasure in asking you to join me and inviting our three speakers to come and join me on the stage, please. Thank you.
My name is Hassan Al-Dawadi. I'm the Secretary General for the Qatar 2022 Supreme Committee. I was formerly the CEO of the Qatar 2022 World Cup bid. I'd like to say that it's an honor and a privilege to be attending and participating in the WISE conference through this panel, and especially being with my esteemed colleagues. It's always very overwhelming being amongst the greats of the world of sports. And in particular with this panel, in terms of combining sports and education, I think one of the things that caused us to very passionately bid for the World Cup was the concept that it will leave a sustainable impact upon the Middle East. And it's a great catalyst. The World Cup is also a great catalyst towards initiatives such as WISE that combines both education with sports to ensure that the lasting benefits continue post the event. So as I said, it's an honor being here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Paul.
Good afternoon, and thank you. I'm Paul Tagliabue. I was recently the CEO of the National Football League in the United States for 17 years. Currently, I'm the chairman of the board of directors of Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And of course, we're very proud to have a campus of our School of International Relations here in Education City in Doha. I guess my experience with this subject goes back over 50 years. At that time, I was getting out of high school, and I was actually being recruited to go to several dozen different colleges on what we call an athletic scholarship in the United States. So that was my introduction to the connection between academic performance and learning on the one hand and athletics on the other hand. And in subsequent decades, I ran the National Football League. We invested in youth programs at many different levels. So from the perspective of sport, as well as from the perspective of education, this is a subject that's been of interest to me for many, many years, and I'm delighted to be here to discuss it with all of you today.
Thank you very much. So Philip?
I'm the president of the Paralympic Games. The last issue, of course, was in London. But really, words excite me also, and innovative in the acronym WISE, that turns me on. Collaboration and collaborating for change. Well, I'm all about change. Most people don't like it, and I'm glad that collaborating is in there. That's what happened in London and made it such a success. And also building well-being. Well, I think we could add building well-being for the world. And since I've been president of the Paralympics since 2001, I've developed this passion, which is for education and sport, and really sport being a fundamental part of all young children's education. So I'm really looking forward to today. Thanks.
Thank you very much. So the first question that I'm going to put to the panelists will go something along these lines. Said in many Western educational institutions, particularly in Britain and the US, sport is given a very, very prominent position. In fact, there's a saying that the Battle of Waterloo was won on the playing fields of Eton. Eton, as many of you will know, is a famous English public school, which has produced, I believe, more prime ministers than any other educational institution in the country. But anyway, sport is considered as essential to leadership qualities. So I will try to turn to Sir Philip first and ask him, Sir Philip, yourself, great Paralympic champion. You've won so many championships yourself. Why is sport held in such a revered place?
Well, coming just first of all to the playing fields of Eton, never that I've played on those playing fields, but I think back in the 19th century, that was leadership of the very few to govern, control, and maybe even exploit the majority. I'm not saying that prime ministers today do that, but I think the 21st century is a very different place from the 19th century. And really, sport should be in schools and universities for the benefit of everybody. Just diverting maybe to the ecological discussion, but this planet Earth, you know, Baumgartner, who fell out of the sky and fell, I don't know how many kilometers a few weeks ago, he said as he was about to do it, why are we bothering with Mars when we've got the Earth down below? And that's the paradise, and I agree with that. And I think that we need a new form of education, balanced education, to deliver new leaders. And I think that we've only got 1 billion years left, you know, upon which we could survive as human beings on this earth. We've only been going as human beings 250,000 years. So I think that the time is right here with WISE to set the stage out for the future and not necessarily copy the past. And just another word on that, this has to start in the schools by delivering this balanced education. And I'm not against academia, don't think that I am, and I know there's a lot of academics here. And it is important, but we must also have the subconscious acquisition of life skills, and sport is brilliant at this. So I think I'm looking forward to this further debate, but I hope I've set the scene there that really, as has already been said today, we do need change, and it's something that we cannot ignore. But as I said before, most people aren't necessarily immediately open to change.
Thank you very much, Sir Philip. Paul, from your experience as the former commissioner of the National Football League, as well as chair of the Board of Governors at Georgetown University, we have the feeling, perhaps in this part of the world, that American sport is very competitive, winner take all. Do you accept that, and do you think this is what is inculcated in schools in America?
Well, American sport is lots of different things. Certainly at one level in the universities, there is a winner-take-all mentality which has become commercialized sport. And in my own judgment, it has moved away from the core mission of the universities. That having been said, sport is many different things. Sport is community, sport is physical exercise, sport is competition at its best, sport is entertainment, sport is business. So you have to recognize that sport is many, many things. As I say, from my own perspective, I think that the core mission of universities is still education, and there's a certain way of structuring university sport that is an integral part of the education mission and the education experience. We can talk a little more about that as we go forward.
Okay, fair enough. And talking of sport as a mission, Hassan, first of all, congratulations. You have done the impossible. This is what I keep hearing, and I'm very, very pleased that at long last, the World Cup will come to the Middle East.
Thank you.
But from your experience, knowing the region, and knowing also what happens outside the region, how would you compare the emphasis on sport in the Middle East as opposed to elsewhere in the world?
I guess I'd have to answer it based on my personal experience. I'm not an academic expert. But from my exposure, if you will, to the education systems in particular in England and in Qatar, as well as looking at from friends who went to university or got educated in the US, I think I'd like to start by actually differentiating between the emphasis on sport and education in the US from Europe, if you will. And Paul, I think you can correct me more on this. I think in the US, the education system or the schools are actually grassroots suppliers of the professional sportsmen of the future. You look at it in terms of high school, they move towards college, and then from college they go whether to the NFL or NBA. Now in Europe, I think the system is slightly more different. It's football. Let's take the sport of football in particular. It's actually association to a club that's separate or independent from the school. You can participate in the school, but most likely your professional career, if you will occur at a separate club or a separate institution. I think in the Middle East, we kind of adhere more to the European system, if you will, where there's a separation from a future as a sportsman or an athlete from the education system. Now, which one is better or not, I can't really judge. From my personal experience, I think it needs a while to look at the best of the two systems. For me, educating in a British system, the one good thing I got about the method of sports was during the physical education classes, or PE, they combined the theoretical with the practical. So you practiced the sport, but you also had the theoretical aspect provided for, which to a certain extent gave a more wider appreciation of sports in general, of the actual particular sport or particular event. And it kind of gave a broader knowledge on that. And I think within the Arabic system, it's more focused, not exclusively focused, on the physical aspects of it. And I think that's the main difference, if you will, between the two systems, in my opinion.
Thank you very much. Mr. Philip, following on from what Hassan has just said, would you think that sports in today's world is a means to an end, or is it an end to itself?
Well, I think I'd sooner rephrase that slightly and say, what should it be in today's world? And really, absolutely, sport for me is a means to an end. It's not just an end in itself. And there was a great book written in 2008 by a French sports philosopher called Robert Redeker, which title, and it was a question, and it was Le sport est-il inhumain? Is sport inhuman? Well, I can tell you, I can recommend that you read that book. However, my answer to the question would be that if it's inhuman, then it's not sport. But it's a really good read. But I think we're at a time now where maybe we should have a 21st century definition for the word sport. And sport is naturally competitive. I've heard our Prime Minister say, we must have competitive sport in schools. Well, sorry, if we have sport in schools, it's going to be competitive, and that's the way it should be. The world's competitive. But what are the values of true sport? Well, I believe that true sport with its values, and I'll tell you a few of them in a minute, can really illuminate the minds of very young children, and of course even older children, such as ourselves. And what are these values? Well, I've got 10 written down here. It won't take too long, but you can make friendships, lifelong friendships in some instances. You can harness, and I was talking to a psychologist from Gaza over lunch, you can harness aggression and frustration, fair play and honesty. A very important one, which we had a lot of in London, fun and excitement. And then this word communication, it's already been talked about a lot, but I have to tell you that I don't believe that using handheld devices that you may communicate very well with one person, but you don't communicate with communities, in my opinion, and you don't learn to talk to other humans face to face. And I think that's another benefit of playing sport. Decision-making comes out of that. And particularly, the final few here, teamwork. Teams working together. Well, collaboration for me was the main reason for the success of London 2012. And not Mitt Romney, by the way. And the other one on teamwork is learning to give to the team rather than always taking. That's something that we see so much in this world. Short-termism, people grabbing while they can and not giving back. Maybe the most important one, playing within the rules. I view that as the antithesis of war, and it teaches self-discipline, maybe slowly in my case. And finally, I come back to fun again, because that's what kids require, all children, whether they have an impairment or not. But sport's not a quick fix. It's not something that can happen within a parliamentary term. It's got to be over the medium to long term in schools, and you have to experience, as a child, the ups and downs and the winning and losing. But I really do believe that combined with the academic learning, this can be one of the ideal vehicles for a child to move through education. There are others, but I think sport, of course I'm biased, is one of the best.
Paul, I think back to a time when sport is very much an integral part of a school day. But lately, I think over the last 10, 15 years, we've seen, at least in England and other places in Europe, sports fields being lost and less emphasis being put on sport, especially with computer games and so many other distractions. How would you think is the place for sport in the American education system at the moment? Is it still alive? Is it still healthy?
Yeah, I think it is. As I said before, I think it's present in different ways, in different levels, with different nuances. You know, in my perspective, it goes back to the fact that in some ways life is about 3 C's: competition, collaboration, and conflict. And I think it's our responsibility as educators, as parents, grandparents, to emphasize the collaboration, to welcome the competition, but to keep it within a sensible framework and to minimize the conflict, whether it's conflict among people or conflict among nations. So the way we look at sport at Georgetown is that we try to have a climate as we further the intellectual growth of our students. The climate is one of high achievement with personal responsibility for leadership and teamwork. So in that framework, sport becomes optimized as an element of education. The way some of our people put it is that sport at Georgetown, intercollegiate sport, intramural sport, is a cycle of preparation and performance, which is what life is about in a sense. Everything is competitive when you're an adult, in professions, in careers, and so forth. So you have to prepare, you have to perform. After you've performed, you've either succeeded or perhaps failed, or somewhere in between. Then you have to self-critique, you have to accept criticism, you have to recommit and re-prepare and compete again. And so sport gives you that set of experiences that are really indispensable as an element, as Sir Philip put it, learning about life, and not just learning what you can read in books or study about in the lab. So if it's in that structure, then I think it's very valuable. If it's not in that structure, then it can be an impediment to education, and it can be a lost opportunity for someone who's seeking an education.
Thank you very much. Hassan, sport is part of the education of life and prepares you to face it better than if you didn't have sport. What do you think is the attitude in the Arab world and in the Middle East? Is sport considered as very much an essential aspect of education, or is it something that you do outside education?
I mean, I think in my personal opinion, I think sports to a certain extent is not as embraced as I think, you know, the gentleman pointed out it could be. In my personal opinion, again, I've got to clarify that. I think it's essential. I agree with what the gentleman said. I mean, ultimately for me, sports builds character. It opens up doors. It's got through the medium of sports, who you are comes out to a large extent, or it helps in terms of creating the character that you are. Accordingly, I think for a nation that's passionate about sports, we perform sports, we play it every day, we follow it continuously, whether it's as readily available or as focused upon in our education system. I think gradually it will be. With the World Cup, I'm hoping that this will be also a catalyst where it'll introduce more and more sporting initiatives within the frameworks that were mentioned in the education system, especially in the Middle East. For the time being, I think it's along the way, it's coming along the way, but it's not as structured or within the confines as mentioned earlier, and I think I'm looking forward to seeing it soon.
Thank you very much. And coming back to you, Sir Philip, we recently witnessed this absolutely thrilling Paralympics in London. I hope you had the opportunity to see it and really enjoy the performances. It was also very inspiring. But, Sir Philip, how easy is it, or how difficult is it to integrate the disabled and other people who are marginalized into the mainstream of sport?
Well, yeah, how easy is it? Well, I've written down here, it depends on the mindset of the integrators. Are their mindsets positive or negative? And you may already know that I'm a great believer in dropping the D word. So, which is, the first step for me is to remove the term, the disabled, from the lexicon. And why? Because it's purely negative in its derivation. If you look at what disabled means in the dictionary, it means does not work. And then it has a collectivizing, a marginalizing effect, and it's all embracing. It's not specific enough. So I think that's very important. And normally I recommend don't look for an alternative, just don't use it. We all should be viewed as members of one society. And it's a little bit like bringing minorities, and you know about minorities, bringing minorities into the mainstream. But coming to the Paralympics and their great success, really, the Paralympics, their greatest, I think, benefit over the past few years, but particularly in London, has been dispelling myths, dispelling negativity. And, but it's not dispelling negativity like many nations have taken legislation out, you know, with regard to the disabled. And that can be viewed as important. I'm not against that. But I think the way you change society and you change perceptions is through positive experiences. And that's indeed what we had in London. And as I said before, I think its biggest impact was educational. And so I don't know if I've answered the question, but really, I think there's fear out there in some sports clubs. Oh, what do I do with this disabled person? Can they be an athlete? Well, London showed that, of course, they can be an athlete. But I think if we change the mindset through positive experiences, then I think we're making progress.
Can I just approach that? In terms of going to the question as to whether sports can integrate also, for lack of a better description, minorities or so, I think that is the beauty of sports. The strong point about sports is its ability to integrate people. It's its ability to bring in people from whatever fringes, if you will, of society within a group of collective individuals practicing a certain sport. I mean, you know, based on my experience, I mean, I went to, when I was younger, I traveled all over the world, and one of the greatest introductions for me into making friends and into the society and into, if you will, the school cliques was through sports. Scunthorpe, I went there to do my A-levels, and if it wasn't for football and getting to know or participating in the football team and participating in a number of the sporting events, I would not have made any friends as fast as I did. I think it's probably one of the most efficient ways of including people from within different sectors of society, different parts of society, and also breaking down barriers. And you can see this on a much higher level, I think, in 2007 in Iraq when it won the Asian Cup. People from different sects in a country that's unfortunately ripped apart by differences in beliefs and otherwise were united in that one moment, in that one instant during a sporting event. So that's the power that sports has in terms of uniting people and bringing people together. So it can be a very, very powerful tool to break down bridges and include every part of society within a function.
Thank you very much. I believe at one stage in South America, civil war, there was a ceasefire while these two countries played out of an important match. So it can even help in bringing about peace. But this question to you, Paul, there's a feeling sometimes that you have to choose between sport and academia. It's the sports guys don't really have a lot of gray matter up there, or the other way around. It's that the guys, the wimpy kids, are the ones who become academic. I don't know where this has come about, but how does one get over this? How do you make sport academically respectable and vice versa?
Well, I think first of all, like I said before, you have to think about the experience of sports and relate that to learning about life. And you have to be quite explicit in what you're trying to accomplish. On top of that, I think that you need to have programs in your university or in your secondary school that think about sport as an element of education. So your coaches, for example, have to understand that they are teachers. That's something that has to be made explicit with your coaches. Your coaches and your professors or your faculty need to understand about work ethic and teamwork. Earlier today, I was in the program here at WISE talking about universities preparing people for the workplace. And the point was made by the gentleman from General Electric and a woman from McKinsey and a woman from the International Labor Organization that two things that are not taught in universities are work ethic and teamwork. And someone said they're neither taught nor evaluated. Well, guess what? In sports, they are. They are taught very explicitly and they are evaluated. In some sense, they're evaluated with your won-loss record if it's a team sport, or if it's an individual sport, how many times have you been knocked out and how many times the other guy been knocked out. So in sport, things are implicit that are integral part of education, and you can have a win-win situation and not have the nerd and not have the dumb jock if you make those values explicit and make those elements of your program.
Thank you very much. So Philip, I'm just teasing the same subject. What about women in sport? I know that in Europe and in the United States, there is no problem. But in the developing world, we don't have as many women taking part in sport. How do you think this can be changed? How can the message that sport makes you a better person, better able, in fact, to become good at academic studies at the same time?
Well, obviously I'm a very big supporter of women, full stop, and also in sport. I think many of the problems of the world today, nearly all of them have been caused by men. And I think that if we're going to find solutions, the only way is for men and women to get together on that. However, coming back to women in sport, and I know you're asking me that question because Nawal Mutakawal could not be here with us. But I think a lot of progress has been made in the West. And let's not forget that women did not have an equal chance of sport in the West long ago. And they've fought very, very hard for that. And I think that we've seen considerable progress from countries that had traditionally in the past have either not allowed or not encouraged women to participate in sport. And I've been to Iran on several occasions, and progress is being made in what some people would think as maybe an Islamic extremist country there. But definitely, I've seen great progress there. I think we've got to, as men, because men still rule most sports, we have to promote it, and that's what we are doing in the Paralympic movement. That's what Jacques Rogge is doing very forcibly within the Olympic movement. And I think also we have to promote women in important positions in sport. And that develops out of national organizations, doesn't develop at the international level, and we have to promote that. But women, give them the voice. If you don't give it to them, men, they'll grab it off you anyway. And I think we're going to see great continuing success there.
Well, I certainly hope so. Hassan, how can sport actually influence lifestyle choices for students?
Well, I think for all the reasons that we've been talking about earlier. I mean, the participation in sports, I think the first thing is to actually make it easily available or easy to participate in. Once people start getting involved in sports, once the younger generation gets involved in sports, all the different elements that we just mentioned earlier, the teamwork, the leadership, the building of character, the fairness, all these principles, if you will, that we've touched upon and are inherent within sport will come out to influence people's lifestyles. It's a matter of making it available. It's a matter of making it easily accessible to individuals to be able to participate within the sport, within a certain sporting activity that they prefer. So, for example, having more infrastructure built to allow for more jogging facilities, to have some more football stadiums built, or five-a-side football stadiums. Whatever sport that's the easiest to have access to. Once you have that in place, I think what you'll find is inherently, as you participate in sport, it just influences your life. You see it within anybody who wants it. And again, I think as you add more and more, if you will, friendly competition. I believe in the principles of competition in sport. Sport is competitive by nature, provided that it's tempered with the principles of fair sportsmanship. You'll find people more excited about it and more willing to adhere to all these principles that come out of it.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, one of the things I think we noticed in the Olympic Games in Britain this time, that Britain won a number of medals that they had not been able to win before. And so this meant that there was a will to win, there's a desire to win, and also that it was possible by particular training, hard training, to actually achieve the goals that set themselves out to do. And I was going to ask Hassan to perhaps elaborate a little bit further on that given the fact that in 10 years' time, you'll be staging the World Cup, do you think that somehow or the other you can create a motivation within the sporting world to try and become really good for that? Is it possible? Is that
Oh, absolutely.
Can that be done?
Absolutely, without a doubt. You see, again, if you talk about the World Cup, as I've said, when we started bidding, we saw it as an opportunity. It's literally an opportunity, no more and no less. It's a great event where people from all over the world get together for 30 days. But those 30 days, before it by a decade and after it by a decade, it's an opportunity that you build upon. You can see it today. I mean, we felt it during the bidding phase. As we were working on the bid, and we met people from different parts of the Arab world, everybody was motivated, extremely excited about the concept of this great event coming to the Middle East. Since we won, there's I remember reading about a former cyclist in Palestine who's opened up a school for football players to participate in 2022. The excitement and the buzz is felt within the grassroots levels, no doubts about that. But you also feel it at different sections of society. Everybody's excited out of benefiting from the World Cup being here. Now the benefits that come out of it aren't just limited in terms of improving the grassroots, if you will, participation for an elite sports achievement, but you're looking at it from all the different sides. I mean, our concept of the World Cup basically touches upon mainly 4 pillars, which is human development, social development, economic development, environmental development. And it's no coincidence that they're based on the Qatar National Vision 2030, which is what we based our strategy upon. And the World Cup as an opportunity, it offers the entire Middle East the opportunity to be elite or to develop in such a way to be elitist or to be professionals and experts within the different sectors that the World Cup touches upon. And I think by 2022, you'll find a great football team from Qatar. You'll find great football teams from the Middle East. But more importantly also, you will find great engineers. You'll find great scientists, great environmentalists, people that from all the different sectors of society that will have benefited from the World Cup.
So in a way, here will be a great opportunity for Qatar and for the Arab world to use sport and to use the competitiveness of sport and the sense of achievement to lift up general levels of performance all across the board.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's the opportunity, as you said, to point out, I mean, to add the competitiveness element into it in terms of, everybody's vying for this jewel. Everybody's looking for these opportunities. Now, the opportunities are not endless. They're vast, but they're not endless. So everybody will have to compete and try to improve themselves and become better towards achieving these opportunities or benefiting from them. The ones that achieve these opportunities or their goals would have benefited in a direct way. The ones that have improved themselves but have not done so have nevertheless benefited themselves. It's a win-win situation if implemented correctly, if utilized correctly. And the best way of utilizing correctly, or the most efficient way of utilizing correctly, is getting it involved within the education system. All these opportunities have to go hand in hand with the education system within the Middle East to ensure that the benefits continue.
Thank you very much. I know that Neither of you are really involved in education from a teaching perspective, perhaps. But if you had the opportunity to structure a curriculum, a school curriculum, and you were brought in and asked how you're going to go about this, using your experience from the world of sport, how do you think you would structure, say, a typical day? Starting with you.
A typical day, well, I think it would, as I started off, it would have to have balance. And I said that sport is competitive, but I'll come back to the day in a moment. But what I wouldn't teach to young kids would be winning. I don't think you can teach winning. I think that's quite natural in the individual. But it would be about skills, it would be about getting better, it would be, if it was a team sport, about team play, but it would build up very, very slowly. It would maintain its fun aspect. And I know that the previous government in Britain, and I'm definitely not being political here, was working towards 5 hours a week of sport in each school for each child of all ages. That hasn't been achieved, and I'm concerned by some of the steps taken by the current government with regard to that. And I don't think that Britain is that wonderful homeland of sport in schools as it used to be, and I think we need to address that. But I think it would form, as I said before, a really balanced part of education. And I would hope that we could get away from league tables and always testing, and allow things to move through and put emphasis on sport, but don't not have to constantly test, but let things follow through from primary school through to junior, as we have it in Britain, and then through to senior.
Paul?
Well, I've actually tried to do this. And, I think let's take an example of kids who are about, let's say, 10 to 13 years old. I think what you need to do is make the game simple. It may be an oversimplified version of the sport, whatever it is, team sport or individual sport. I think you need to involve the parents or the grandparents or the aunt or the uncle or the older brother, older sister. You need to have the teachers who are in the classroom talking to the coaches who are in the arena or on the field. They have to work together. They all have to recognize their teaching. It has to be a coordinated effort. At the National Football League, we used to run a program and fund a program with other partners where we would pay the salary of a man or a woman who was trained to go in and be the coordinator of the parents, the grandparents, the coaches, the teachers, the administrators. And it was designed to see whether that type of program would raise the academic performance of high school athletes. Had very positive, dramatic effect. So if it's done thoughtfully, and Hassan and I have been talking to each other probably for 3 or 4 years, and I think he's really onto something when he says that the World Cup here will become a catalyst for participation, not just in sport, but in education and in science and in professions at all levels. Because when they get going with their youth programs, one of the first things that you'll find is the young people have a sense of self-esteem. They have a sense of achievement. They have a sense of self-confidence. And that carries from the athletic field into other endeavors in life. So, I think what they're doing is going to unfold over time and be quite a remarkable story by the time we get to 2022.
Yeah, Hassan, coming back to you, we're looking at 600 million children don't have schooling or unlikely to get schooling, and WISE is trying various approaches to see how we can try and close this gap. But my experience, I don't know if it's probably yours as well, is that no matter how poor a society and no matter how difficult it might be for the children to get education, the one thing they won't do is they'll kick a ball around. If you haven't got a ball, they'll make a ball out of something, and they will kick it around and derive huge pleasure out of it without any encouragement from anyone. How can we use this spirit? So obviously there's something there that brings them together, they organize them. How can we use that to try and fill in the gaps of formal education? Is it possible? Can that be brought into play?
There are a number of projects that we've undertaken ourselves as well during the bidding phase, actually. Generation Amazing When we went to certain countries within Asia to underprivileged children, if you will, and we created schools with football pitches. Effectively, we built football pitches for them to participate in, and to kind of get that process involved in, and more. It was initially to get more community spirit involved, and also to add the principles of sportsmanship to the younger generation. But also, in doing so, we came to realize, and we offered them, just to add, an opportunity to visit one of the games of the World Cup. Certain people who showed promise in terms of leadership and otherwise, we offered them an opportunity to visit South Africa to attend a World Cup match. And the experience was, in talking to them, it was actually eye-opening. I mean, it was, for them, it was an ability to see the world get together for that one event, and a world get together for a sporting event, and it's people from different ethnic backgrounds just celebrating, and it added sort of a bond amongst them as well. But more importantly, it showcased for me the strength that sport has in breaking down barriers, opening up doors. I think, going back to more specifically to your question, it's, again, providing the facilities, ensuring that the facilities are available, ensuring that it's easy for people to participate in the sports, and then gradually linking sporting events with education. Whether it may be that you've got, for example, coaches that also double up as teachers and provide certain lessons, rudimentary at first, but then become more and more sophisticated gradually, depending on the facilities and the circumstances surrounding the individuals. But the point is, it's getting everybody to participate in the game, and more importantly, finding that link. It's a great doorway towards education. Finding that link towards education. Education doesn't necessarily have to be, in a classroom with 4 doors. It could be on the football pitch itself. Get people to play, and then give them a biology class or whatever it may be. It might not be, my example might not be very practical, but it's a solution as opposed to not doing anything. But it's utilizing that great passion that sport inspires in people and linking it to a necessity that is education.
So just to wind everything down, on this side, I'd like to ask each of the panelists what sport has meant to you in your personal life. Start with you, Sir Philip, please.
Well, I think it's been nearly everything at different times of my life. When I was at school, before I had my accident, I used to like playing sport. I didn't like training at all. And then the second day I was in bed after falling rock climbing and breaking my back, I saw them playing wheelchair basketball outdoors, and I thought subconsciously, that must be for me. And I went to Manchester University. I scraped through my degree in geography, but definitely got a first-class honours in wheelchair basketball. And I was training with the stand-up team there, who there wasn't one Englishman playing for them. I think there were, of course, Americans and Egyptians and Mexicans, but I was training with them. Then I went to France with sport, playing basketball. And that's where I acquired a second language, which has been crucial, really, for me to be elected as president of the International Paralympic Committee. And even more importantly, I found my wife, who sat over there, probably the greatest thing I've ever found, actually. Dug her up in France, and we've been together for 38 years now. And so sport's done everything for me. And then in my administrative life, learning to sleep on big decisions. Don't rush a big decision. I would have done that at 25. I'd have been straight in there. And I think also learning to listen, which is probably not an easy thing to do when you're young. And I know that we've got the learners here who want to be listened to, and I absolutely agree with that. And so you never stop learning through sport. It's just this wonderful vehicle that can hopefully take you through a very full life.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Well, I guess I would say that sport gives you that rush when you've overcome adversity. There's that intangible feeling, that intangible high when you overcome adversity. And I'm thinking of the Paralympians. It's the most palpable there. I had the good fortune of meeting Sir Philip in 2010 in Vancouver, where we attended the Winter Paralympic Games together. And those athletes define adversity as opportunity. And to see them succeed in their sports, but then to recognize that everyone who's competing in sport is doing the same thing. We're all testing our limits and trying to overcome our limits. And if we didn't have sport, I think we would all miss that intangible which defines the human spirit in terms of what we can do as opposed to what we cannot do.
Thank you very much. Hassan?
I owe sports everything that I've got. Ever since I was a kid, and I started playing, participating in sports, as I said, I traveled a lot. And if it wasn't for sports, or in particular football, I wouldn't have made a lot of friends. It was always a great gateway for me to become part of the group, part of the clique, part of the school team, and gradually from there have friends, if you will. I mean, it's as basic as that. But it also helped me in my academic life. And an example for me that always, up until this day is I can see it clearly. When I used to go to university in Sheffield, I used to go jogging. And for anybody who's been in Sheffield, it's a very hilly town. So at times, you always, as you jog, I always look at, for example, the next hill and think, okay, this is it. This is going to be the last one. And then when you go on top of it, you think, I've got energy for just that one last push. I'm going to push it through. And I go through it. And it developed sort of, if you will, mental tenacity. And I remember this very clearly. One of my exams, international law, I was just exhausted. I don't know why, but I finished 2 questions. I had a 3rd question to finish, and I was just out of energy. And I recognized that's the same mental tenacity that I had in jogging up those hills, kicking in, and I just literally powered through it. And for me, that was, if you will, the greatest example of bringing the elements or the character building the sport brings into you straight into the academic life and academia. And as I said, if it wasn't for that, I don't think I would have had the competitive toughness or the tenacity or the ability to even be sitting down talking to any of the audience members today. So I owe it a lot.
Thank you very much. Right, now the floor is yours. Anybody who would like to ask a question or raise a point or make a comment?
I'm Andrew Lehman. I'm the CEO of the Durban Chamber of Commerce and Industry. And I think I need to preface my remarks by saying that I was a school teacher for 30 years and extensively and very deeply involved in school sport. So I support everything that's been said about sport. I'm concerned about the increasing disparity in our country between the people who achieve and those who don't have opportunities to achieve. Because it seems to me that fundamental to education is the identification of children's talents and abilities and the nurturing of them. So here we have a situation which I suspect might apply in other African countries and perhaps even has spread to some of the developed countries now, where we don't have sports people in teaching any longer. So the identification of talent, which was once done in schools, is not done any longer. Now, middle class and well-to-do families are very good at identifying talent among the children and the grandchildren. But poor people don't have that advantage. So while sport is a wonderful agent for social cohesion in South Africa, I think that's obvious to everybody, that applies to the broader community rather than the young players. And I think that we really need a concerted effort to bring sport back into schools because it provides the opportunity for individuals to be developed in their own abilities, and that achieves equity and parity later on.
Thank you very much. Paul, do you want to handle it?
Yeah, I agree 100% with what has just been said. I think access and affordability are problems in every part of the world. Some countries do a little bit better than others. I think Sir Philip ranks the countries who do well with the Paralympics and provide the right kinds of resources. And I think those kinds of rankings are very good to have because they prod the people who don't finish too well, who become self-satisfied and begin to take things for granted. I know in America we have a huge problem right now with the pressure on municipal and local government finance. The disparity that the gentleman is talking about has become a reality in our big cities where the first thing that gets cut in many cases is youth sports. But in the wealthier suburban communities, they just tack on a fee and people can afford it. So it's really a very, very serious problem. And happy to say in America, we've got some very active citizens groups working on it and increasing numbers of elected officials focusing on it.
Thank you. Sir Philip, would you like to add something to that?
Well, I think, I mean, I'm not a statistics person. I'm really a principles and values person. But I'm absolutely convinced that sport in schools is good value for money at all levels. And I think that's why it should be back in there. And it should be back in there, as I think you said, that it's come out of some Western countries. It's not important anymore because of this hierarchy of subjects that I think Sir Ken Robinson relates to, about maths and languages at the top. And I think he says that dance doesn't even get a look in, and I can tell you he never mentions sport. And I think there should be a re-evaluation of the value of true sport in schools for young children as a vehicle for their lives. And then, of course, some of them will be talented at sport and will move through, and that then has to be the pathways for that. But then there has to be the pathways for how sport brings their talents out in other areas, and they leave sport behind and they go off on another angle. But we have to have this more balanced, more diverse education that can really adapt to each individual and not force them through the ringer, which probably only suits 5% of the pupils.
My name is Jamil Abdulati. I'm from Palestine, Gaza. And those who do not know Gaza know that we are under occupation. And I'm the director of the Center for Mind Body Medicine in Gaza, and working there as a psychologist. You know, when you talk about sport, you talk about joy, you talk about balance. And we work in Gaza, there is a massive trauma, and you know, the trauma strained the body and the mind, and how we could melt and bring the activity and the sport in the school system in a way that do not have any opposite from the parents, that we need our children to do their school performance as well as to practice the sport. So this is one of the main concerns for us as a parents. But what we did, we're trying to, through the mind-body skills, to use the movements to get rid of all of the tension and the overwhelming feeling through the movements. In our skills, we use the movement, we use active meditation. And I will tell a little bit story about one of these skills. This when there's a shelling and there's a tanks crossing the borders. We were in that school and we're stuck with a group of students. They are afraid and try to cry, and then it was dangerous that these children to go out, and I was with them that time. So I asked them to get down and lay on the grounds, and we tried to think. I stuck there with them. So I think, how could I help these children? I think to do shaking and movements while we are in the grounds. So how to use this issue and use the movement to get rid of the body from the tension, and from time to time, when the tanks shooting, the bullets, we shake our bodies, and then when to stop, we stop. And we repeat that from time to time, and this we could help the children to be balanced and to be aware of the dangers outside, and at the same time to use the movement and to use in order to make the balance. So it's important that in our work that to bring the activities within the class context to help the children for more school performance. This is one of the indicators for the parents, and and also for all the community of improvement of the kids. So I know there is a school for sports, but as well as we need that to help in the trauma environments and work to help the kids to improve their skills. And this is one of the approaches that we use. There's a different skills that we use: meditation, we use imagery. This also improve the school performance. So in this way, I'm giving an example how we use and how to melt the skills and the sport to be fed with the school system. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do you want to give that a go? Let's see. It's
Well,
complex.
It really is, and you've got a person here who's experienced it. So whatever I say is always going to be based on theory and principles. I mean, you've got a live, example over here as to how sports and sporting activities are utilized in a very, very fundamental way in very extreme circumstances and traumatic circumstances. The way I'd see it is, again, it goes back to what we've basically been saying. The introduction of sports and physical activity within the educational system is essential. Again, an extreme situation, and it can be utilized in a very practical manner. I think also, aside from also the physical elements and the physiological elements that sports definitely has a lot of benefit in, as I said earlier, it goes back to, it builds character as well. When you teach people about principles of sportsmanship, when you teach them about fair play, when you teach them about the need for leadership in certain situations within a team sport as well as an individual sport, when you teach them ultimately to dig deep down at a moment, and that's where competition comes in, deep down at a moment where you think everything is lost, but you're going to give it that last push, just that one last push, and give it all you've got, and then you achieve what you've been aiming to achieve. Just that ability to dig deep down is invaluable. And when you look at it and apply it to your professional life, you can see a huge difference in the mental attitude and the way you deal with things. So to start with, I'd like to applaud the gentleman for the initiatives that they're undertaking. And as I said, I completely agree with the need for sports and education to be going hand in hand within the classroom environment.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more questions?
First of all, I'd like to start by thanking you for being here and sharing your experiences and expertise with us. My name is Tala Hamash, and I actually study at the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service here in Qatar. I'm just going to focus a little bit on women. And Sir Philip Craven, you mentioned that women in the West fought very hard to get their opportunity or participation. And for me, that's of great value, because I feel like, the responsibility goes, different ways. It's my responsibility. It's also the responsibility of different organizations or departments or, different social actors. But I'd like to put this question out and see, your feedback I'd like to know what you think and on whose responsibility you think it is, to ensure that women receive this opportunity to participate in sports. Because personally speaking, from a personal experience, as a basketball player and as a person, a community service worker who's coached Iraqi refugees, I've seen how much sport, how much it can do for you, how much, it's such a great way of empowerment. So I'd just like to hear what you think about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Whose responsibility?
I'm kicking off. Okay, well, that's fine. Whose responsibility is it? That's a good question. Well, I'm here today because I didn't like the way I was being treated, because the founder of our movement, a man called Sir Ludwig Gutmann, who was a great man, he devised rehabilitation systems through sport that meant that people with spinal injuries didn't die within 3 or 6 months, but lasted even as long as me. I've been going 45 years now. But I crossed swords with him when I found out that he still really treated, in his mind, athletes like patients, and I wasn't going to have that anymore. So I'm not going to give you any more of that story now, but just to say that I think fundamentally it is the individual that's being oppressed, if I can use that word, which is a bit strong maybe, that has to react. But I think through my experience around the world, and now I'm not 18 fortunately, and I'm 62, I've learned there's a way to get through with regard to when you want something and you want more participation of women in sport. We want more people playing Paralympic sport. And I think that that shows, and it comes back to that word, which is collaboration, collaborating for change. And I think that that's where this teamwork, but the women's movement or women's movements or women in general, I mean, they're so well heard these days relative to how they used to be that I don't think you've got to push too hard at what is at least a door that's very much, I think, partially or nearly totally open now. But I think it's got to come from women to begin with. But surely governments are not going to turn a blind eye to you now. I mean, we're in the 21st century now. So let's move ahead together. But men and women, as I've said before, have got to come together to solve problems. And women in sport, if it's still a problem, then men and women similarly have got to come together and solve it.
Lady, do you think that's a satisfactory answer, or do you think the conditions are different in different places?
I think that's great insight. I would like to hear from Mr. Paul and Mr. Tamir, so if possible, just because I'm extremely interested in this, and I was actually kind of more focused perhaps on the Middle East region, because there are, you know, believe it or not, there are still sort of cultural constraints.
No, we know.
And traditional constraints, exactly, and I'm sure you've heard of...
We've seen it recently.
Yes, exactly. In the Saudi delegation in the Olympics in London, you know, there was a big fuss about the female representatives. So I would really, really appreciate, you know, some, you know, your insight on this.
I think your wish can be granted.
If possible.
Wow, talk about putting pressure now on an answer. I genuinely think it's a responsibility of everybody. Society in general, every aspect of society, every player of society, organizations, women themselves, fighting for their rights or demanding their rights to participate in sports, but also other aspects of society in facilitating and assisting women achieving that. You take the example of the Saudi female. I think you know, the Saudi government took a very, very great step. Yes, there was the backlash, and there's always going to be the backlash from people who disagree. In the end, it's a question of being very sure about your principles, being very sure for what you stand for, and continuing with it. And she, you know, very bravely went out on the global stage at a moment in time when it could have been very easy for her just to step back. And I think it's ultimately the responsibility of individuals and society to get together, for society and all the different organizations in the society to facilitate the inclusion of women in our sports, but also for the women to continue taking brave steps forward and showcasing to the world the benefits that sports has to them, but also the willingness for them to stand for their right to participate. I hope that answers your question to a certain extent.
I'd say in the U.S., there was a very specific piece of legislation passed 40 years ago, 1972, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, which was in some ways probably the last step in our civil rights movement, which you could date from 1954 roughly to 1972. And the unique thing about this legislation was that it required equal funding for athletic and other facilities, educational facilities generally for women, in any institution that received federal money. And it has had an enormous impact in the last 40 years. There's a lot been written about it at all levels. And so if you'd be interested in a case study, it'd be very easy to start on Google, Title IX of the Civil Rights Act, 1972. And it continues to be a contentious area because some sports in which men participate, including football, of different types of football, whether it's American football, European football, rugby, Aussie rules football, require large squads and lots of expenses. But there are mechanisms for equalizing this, and I think it's been extremely effective and very powerful in creating opportunities for women, not just in sports, but throughout society generally, but it was part of the broader civil rights movement.
Can I just say one other thing? The other thing I've found as I've gone through life is that that really this thing with regard to it's okay in the West now, but it's not okay in the Middle East. Well, that isn't the case. And if you look back 100 years, the West was where certain countries are now, or maybe less than 100 years. And so it's a progression, and it's a progression that everyone in the world has to help, but progress is being made. It's a fight at the end of the day, you know. I like fighting, actually, and I'm right with women if they want me to help them fight, but it's a fight to get what you're entitled to, and it is, as Paul has said, a civil right.
I think just to add that last, to build on that last statement, it is, as you correctly pointed out, Sir Philip, you do have at a certain point in time in the West did to a certain, limit women participation. Today, you've got countries, you've got, Qatar right now, you've got a lot of push towards women's participation within the sporting community. You go to other countries within the region, and it's gradually shifting towards that. Again, it's always got to be that one extra step from one place to another and one society to another. And gradually, I think you'll see great women athletes coming out of the Middle East.
Thank you. I think we'll leave that for the time being. We might come back to it because Paul today raised a very interesting point about what happens when you actually exercise. That there's a very clear difference of development in your brain, and therefore it's not just a case of entertainment, which is how perhaps a lot of people think about it, but that it is very much part and parcel of your actual physical and mental development. If we have time, we'll come to it. But I think there's a gentleman waiting here impatiently to ask his question. Please, sir.
First of all, thank you very much from the host to the panelists. Very balanced, very positive panel discussion. Thank you so much, sir. My name is Dawood Waeed. I had an NGO called Buruj Realization. We work with primary and teenagers, around 15,000 in India. So I have two very short questions. One to Sheikh Hassan about, so we do a lot of teenage workshops here in the Gulf also to schools, and the obesity level, the teenagers, though they love the sports, but unfortunately it is not translating back to the sports playing field. It's on the Xboxes and PSP, and we have this teenage joke that if Khalid bin Walid played PSP, wouldn't be where we are today. So how do you say they love Chelsea and Barca, but it doesn't happen on the field, it's on the computer games. That's one part, sir. Sir Philip, so it's just honor to listen to you, it's wonderful. We followed the Paralympics very well. So you used two words, fun and excitement for sports. So we do a lot of pre-primary school and primary school level sports education. How far have we pushed our sports where fun and competition have taken a new tangent? The hero of the Olympics, the Blade Runner, Oscar, when he lost, he cried foul. So has it become too much of commerce and status symbol sports? Have we pushed it so far? And are children doing the same thing in schools now? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Who wants to take this one on?
Hassan's first.
Yeah, I think it's
Nominate me, why don't you? Sorry, to get the gist of the question, you're saying basically the teenagers in the Middle East, or in general right now, are more focused on sports or video games as opposed to on the field. And wow. You see, the one thing about this question is it makes me realize that I've actually grown a generation. So thanks for that. I think it's, I won't even comment on that slide. I think, I do agree with you. I mean, I think to a large extent, technology in general has made life much more convenient for us to participate in physical activities. But again, it comes back, and that's why essentially it comes back to linking sports with education. And when I say education, I particularly mean the schools, the school system itself. The schools have to introduce that element. They have to introduce that physical activity. I was just talking to my colleagues in Oman today about, most schools now going ahead with tablets, and there's a lot of interactive elements, and technology's made life that convenient. You no longer have to carry a bag, but you can just carry your little iPad or tablet, and you've got all your books in there, which is great. But it misses out on an essential element, that physical, tangible element of holding a pen and writing and improving your penmanship, or just even the simple activity of carrying 10 textbooks. So I do think, yes, we are becoming more, if you will, we're becoming lazier to a large extent because of a lot of the convenience of technology, and in particular the video games. Now, don't get me wrong, video games have a positive effect. on the individuals as well, and some studies have shown that. Coordination, hand-eye coordination, and otherwise. But I think, especially when it comes to schools, schools have to push that physical activity element onto it. They have to push it onto the fields, not in terms of within the classroom only, but onto the fields. That element of competition, that element of trying to be better physically, mentally, on the field, competing with your colleagues and working with them, has to be pushed on there. Otherwise, down the road we'll be geniuses with everything else that we want to do, but will we be able to be physically competent enough to live a long and healthy life? That would be an issue. So I agree with you to a large extent with what you're saying, and I think it should be pushed within the schooling system to ensure that this doesn't happen.
Very, very quickly, this is why sport has got to get back into schools, because of you mentioned obesity, you mentioned several things. Fun and excitement, though, in sport is not only in schools. I mean, we saw it at the Olympics and Paralympics, where the whole of the crowds, there were nearly 3 million spectators at the Paralympics. They were inspired and they were excited. Now you just asked, has it gone to excess? And I think in certain professional sports, where players try and cheat the referee to intentionally get players sent off to give them a man advantage, that is not sport. That is criminality in a way, in my view. And it's even as bad or worse than doping. I'm opening up another issue there, but that needs to be addressed. But I think intrinsically, sport is exciting and it is fun, and every child should have the chance to experience it. That's why it should be a major part of the school curriculum.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Well, thank you very much for this very inspiring session. This is Marta Llanos from Peru. I would like to share that in the Convention of the Right of the Child, Article 31 refers to the strongest right of every child to play. And I think the subject of play encompasses sports and encompasses movement, and this goes together with the new concepts and new research in neuroscience. The more we are able to move, the more we are able to have possibilities of managing our bodies, the more our minds become more flexible, becomes more understanding. And I think in a sense, if we are talking about this very big theme of well-being, this is what the power of, we call it play, sports, movement can have towards the development of human beings. And if I go further, if we have human beings that are flexible, that are really easy and able to understand and move in the path of life, then you are really contributors of peace. And therefore, I feel that right now it is a great discussion, because when we talk about play, sometimes people try to say, well, if you are going to play, well, I better don't send my small child of 3 or 4 years old to play, because what is going to be learning is just playing. And I think this is a great myth, that in the new paradigm on 21st century, we should all be responsible for changing this misconception and stereotypes about play, because really the value of play is enormous. And right now, the World Association of Play that I belong have been given the responsibility to write comment 31 in order to provide more details about this value, about this right of the child, the same as the child have a right towards education, towards health, towards nutrition, have a value towards play. So we really need to make a contribution and innovations towards play, take the myth out of play, and realize that education, if we think of the new concept of education, the pillars of how to be and how to live with others, could be strongly be improved with the support of play, sports, and arts in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm sure that everybody on this side agrees with you 100%.
There's more and more scientific evidence now that play not only strengthens the body, invigorates the body, the circulatory system, but it actually has a physical effect on the brain and the chemistry of the brain. And it makes the brain function better, process information better, in some ways contributes to intelligence and to all of the faculties that the brain manages. So I think the point being made is very, very important, and the science that's going to unfold in the next decade or two in this area, I think, is going to be phenomenal in helping societies understand the difference between a sedentary lifestyle and a lifestyle that involves exercise, including sport.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we've run out of time just as things are beginning to get really interesting. But of course, you can always try and speak to the panel, and I'm sure that you can engage in very, very lively discussions. I would like to invite you to join me in showing our appreciation to our wonderful panel today.